The House Oversight Committee chamber buzzed with a restless hum, like a storm about to break. Rows of polished wood desks gleamed under harsh lights, but the air crackled with something fiercer, raw, unspoken defiance. At the center, Representative Jasmine Crockett sat, her posture regal, her eyes a furnace of resolve. Across the room, Chairman James Comer gripped his gavel, his knuckles pale, his smirk a brittle mask. This wasn't just a hearing. It was a battlefield, and America was watching. The topic? Waste, fraud, and abuse. A flimsy banner for Comer's latest MAGA crusade, born in the ashes of Trump's debate collapse just weeks ago. The former president's flailing performance had left Republicans desperate, and Comer's hearing reeked of retaliation, a clumsy swing at Project 2025 and DI programs that dared to champion the marginalized. But Crockett wasn't here to play their game. She was here to burn it down. She leaned into the microphone, her voice steady as granite, each word a blade. Mr. Chairman, let's be real. This hearing is the best example of what waste, fraud, and abuse looks like, because somebody got their feelings hurt in a debate. The room froze. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery, as if the walls themselves recoiled. Comer's jaw slackened, his eyes wide, caught in the headlights of her truth. That smug grin, the one he'd worn like armor, crumbled into something pathetic, arrogance unmasked as fragility. Crockett didn't blink. Her gaze held him, unyielding, a black woman from Texas who'd clawed her way to this seat through courtrooms and campaigns, now standing as the voice of millions who'd been dismissed, erased, or silenced. She wasn't just speaking for herself. She was every immigrant hustling for a dream, every kid told they didn't belong, every soul who'd ever faced a gavel and refused to bow. The chamber's silence screamed louder than any applause. On X, clips of her words were already sparking, hashtags igniting like wildfire. But this moment, this clash of fire and fear, was bigger than one line. It was a reckoning years in the making, a story of two Americas colliding. And to understand why Comer froze, you had to know the man behind the gavel, and the hero who'd come to topple him. The year was 2024, and America was a tinderbox. The presidential election loomed like a thundercloud, every debate, every headline a spark threatening to ignite. Donald Trump, once the untouchable showman, had stumbled badly. His latest debate was a disaster, a rambling mess that left pundits speechless and MAGA loyalists grasping for excuses. The Republican machine, wounded but vicious, needed a distraction, a way to rally the base. Enter James Comer, the Oversight Committee's gavel-wielding warrior, with a hearing dressed up as accountability but reeking of revenge. Its target? Project 2025 and DI initiatives, code for diversity, for progress, for the America that dared to look forward. This wasn't just politics. It was a war on values, a calculated assault on the soul of a nation. Comer's hearing, with its lofty title of Waste, Fraud, and Abuse, was a sham, a dog whistle for those who saw inclusion as a threat, who flinched at the rise of voices long silenced. Project 2025, a blueprint for conservative control, was their gospel, and DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, was their scapegoat. They called it fraud, Crockett called it fear. And in that chamber, the stakes couldn't have been higher. If diversity fell, what would stand? If the marginalized were silenced, whose America would survive? Across the digital ether, X buzzed with urgency. Crockett's in there fighting for us, one user typed, a single mom from Chicago who saw her daughter's future in the balance. If she doesn't shut this down, who will? Another posted, a queer activist from Atlanta, their words liked 1,000 times. The fear was real, the hope fragile. Every progressive, every immigrant, every person who'd ever felt less than watched with bated breath. This wasn't just a hearing, it was a mirror, reflecting who America chose to be. Comer, from his Kentucky stronghold, played the part of untouchable power. His career was built on probes and soundbites, chasing shadows of scandal while shielding his own. He was the system's darling, a man who thrived on control, his drawl dripping with the confidence of someone who'd never had to fight for his place. But Crockett? She was Texas fire, forged in the crucible of Dallas courtrooms, where she defended the forgotten against a world that didn't care. Her seat in Congress wasn't handed to her. It was won through sweat, sacrifice, and a refusal to bend. She carried the weight of every underdog who'd ever stared down a giant. This clash wasn't just about policy. It was personal, primal, a reckoning for every viewer who'd felt dismissed, erased, or told to wait their turn. Crockett stood for them, her voice a beacon in the fog of division. But Comer? He was the gatekeeper, the man who thought he could silence her with a gavel and a smirk. To understand why his face froze when she spoke, why his world tilted in that moment, you had to know the man behind the gavel, and the lies he'd peddled for years. James Comer was a man who wore his Kentucky roots like a badge of untouchable virtue. Born on a Graves County farm, He'd spun a tale of dirt under the nails grit, a small-town boy who'd risen to Congress by sheer will. But beneath the folksy drawl and tailored suits lay something colder, a bulldog of MAGA's machine, clawing for power in a world he feared was slipping away. As chair of the House Oversight Committee, he wielded his gavel like a scepter, a gatekeeper of an America he believed belonged to men like him. To the faithful, he was a crusader. To the rest, he was the face of privilege, cloaked in hypocrisy. His rise was no accident. Comer had mastered the art of the spotlight, a state legislator turned congressman who'd sniffed out the winds of 2016 and pledged loyalty to Trump's revolution. By 2022, he was a star, promising to unearth Biden's corruption with the zeal of a bloodhound. His hearings were theater, grand pronouncements of waste, fraud and abuse, each one a brick in his fortress of relevance. But the truth? His probes were houses of cards, collapsing under their own weight. His star witness in the Biden impeachment saga, a supposed whistleblower, was indicted for fabricating lies. The headlines stung, but Comer's grin never wavered, as if denial were his birthright. Flash to a sweltering 2023 hearing, Comer pontificating on Jeffrey Epstein's files, vowing transparency to a nation hungry for answers. The cameras loved him, his voice steady, his posture that of a man who'd already won. But the grilling fizzled, no bombshells, no revelations, just another empty promise. X lit up with scorn, Comer's chasing ghosts again, one user jeered, their post shared thousands of times. Yet he pressed on undeterred, his calm facade a shield against the cracks forming beneath. Every failed probe, every debunked claim, chipped away at his myth, but he doubled down, lecturing on decorum, while his committee descended into shouting matches. That was the genius of Comer's arrogance. He thrived on control, even as chaos swirled. Picture him in early 2024, banging his gavel as Marjorie Taylor Greene ranted, his face a mask of patience while he scolded disorder. But the room saw through it. His calls for civility were a performance, a way to silence voices like Jasmine Crockett's, whose very presence, a black woman unapologetic, qualified, threatened the world he'd built. Each time she spoke, his jaw tightened, his eyes betrayed a flicker of dread. She wasn't just a colleague, she was a mirror, reflecting a nation evolving beyond his grip. Comer's power was rooted in a fading America, one where men like him set the rules and expected gratitude. His hearings, like the one Crockett torched, weren't about oversight, they were about fear. Fear of diversity, of progress, of a future where his smirk couldn't save him. Every smug grin hid that deeper truth. He was a man running out of time, clinging to a gavel as the tide turned. His probes on DEI, his obsession with dismantling inclusion, weren't policy. They were personal, a desperate bid to hold back the inevitable. The irony? Comer thought he could outlast her. He saw Crockett's fire and mistook it for recklessness, her truth for overreach. He didn't know the woman across the aisle, didn't grasp the steel forged in her story. His empire, built on bluster and half-truths, was a castle of sand. And as Crockett's voice rose in that chamber, sharp and unshakable, the first grains began to slip. To understand why his world trembled, why his mask cracked when she spoke, you had to know the hero waiting in the wings, a woman whose story would make his empire quake. Jasmine Crockett was no stranger to battles. Born in St. Louis, raised in the shadow of struggle, she carried the kind of fire that only comes from knowing the world doesn't hand you justice, you have to seize it. Dallas became her proving ground, where she stepped into courtrooms as a public defender, a young black woman staring down a system rigged to crush the voiceless. Picture her at 25, hair pulled back, standing before a judge who barely met her gaze, defending a teenager caught in a cycle of poverty and profiling. The odds were brutal, overworked, underpaid, cases stacked like bricks on her desk, but Jasmine fought. Every plea, every motion, was a vow, no one gets left behind. Her roots ran deep, nourished by a Baptist faith that taught her righteousness wasn't loud, it was steady. Sundays in church, voices lifted in him, gave her an anchor, a moral compass that never wavered. That same spirit pulsed through her Delta Sigma Theta sorority, where sisterhood wasn't just a word but a lifeline. She'd sit with her line sisters, laughing over late-night study sessions, but also plotting change, voter drives, community forums, a shared dream of dismantling inequity. Those bonds forged an unshakable core, a certainty that she wasn't alone in the fight. Ex-users would later post grainy photos of her at those early rallies, captioning them, "She was always a queen." Her path to politics was no gilded escalator, unlike James Comer's smooth ride through Kentucky's old boy networks. Jasmine clawed her way up, first as a Texas state representative in 2018, where she walked into Austin's capital with the weight of history on her shoulders. She wasn't just a lawmaker, she was a beacon for every black girl watching, every immigrant family praying for a voice. Late nights blurred into mornings, poring over bills, crafting policies to protect the vulnerable, renters facing eviction, kids trapped in underfunded schools. Her office was a war room, littered with coffee cups and dog-eared case files, each one a life she refused to let slip through the cracks. In 2022, she became the 55th black woman ever elected to Congress, a milestone that hit like a thunderclap. For viewers at home, moms in Chicago, students in Atlanta, abuelas in Houston, it wasn't just news. It was personal. "She's fighting for me," a barista tweeted, her post going viral as thousands nodded in agreement. Jasmine carried their hopes, their pain, their pride, into the marble halls of Washington. Every step was a defiance of the comers of the world, men who saw her as an anomaly, a threat to their carefully guarded order. Where Comer coasted on privilege, Jasmine's ascent was a gauntlet, every degree, every campaign, every speech a brick laid in a road others could follow. Her sacrifices were quiet but bone-deep. Picture her at 2 a.m., alone in her Dallas apartment, the glow of a laptop illuminating her face as she reviewed case law, knowing a client's freedom hung in the balance. Or campaigning in 100-degree Texas heat, shaking hands at barbecues, her smile unwavering even as hecklers spat venom. She bore the weight of representation, not just for herself, but for every person who'd been told they didn't belong. Her faith, her sisters, her community kept her grounded, but the cost was real. She traded sleep for strategy, comfort for courage, knowing the fight was bigger than her. That fight shaped her voice, sharp and unyielding, a blade honed by years of slaying dragons, judges, prosecutors, systems that chewed up the powerless. Comer's world, built on press conferences and empty probes, couldn't fathom her. He saw her testimony as a stunt, she saw it as a culmination. Every word she'd spoken in that hearing, "This hearing is the best example of waste, fraud and abuse," was a spark from a lifetime of fire. She wasn't just prepared for Comer, she was built for him, a hero forged in the crucible of a nation that demanded she prove her worth at every turn. For the audience, Jasmine was more than a congresswoman. She was proof that resilience could triumph, that a black woman from Texas could stare down a gavel and make it flinch. Her story resonated in living rooms and barbershops, in group chats and X threads, where people saw their own struggles in her eyes. This wasn't just testimony, it was a lifetime of standing tall, ready to face the ultimate foe. Armed with her truth, Jasmine stepped into the fray, her voice a clarion call. But as tensions ignited in that chamber, Comer's mask began to slip in ways no one saw coming, a crack that would soon shatter his carefully crafted empire. The hearing room was a pressure cooker, every glance a spark, every word a fuse. Jasmine Crockett sat like a queen on a battlefield, her notes fanned before her, eyes locked on Sky Perryman, the witness whose testimony was about to blow the lid off James Comer's sham. The topic was Project 2025, the MAGA blueprint with Trump's name etched 312 times in its pages, a fact Comer's Republicans had dodged like a guilty secret. Crockett's voice cut through the haze, sharp as a blade. "Ms. Perryman, let's talk facts. 312 mentions of a certain former president, and yet we're here debating fiction?" The room stirred, a ripple of murmurs. Perryman nodded, her voice steady. "That's correct, Congresswoman. It's no fiction, it's their playbook." Comer's gavel twitched in his hand, his face a storm cloud. He leaned forward, voice booming like a thunderclap. "Order. The witness will stick to the scope of this hearing." The interruption was meant to intimidate, to wrestle back control, but Crockett didn't flinch. Her gaze flicked to him, cool and unyielding, a silent dare. She turned back to Perryman, her tone slicing through his bluster. "Fiction is what we're being sold, Ms. Perryman. Fiction is this hearing, wasting taxpayer dollars on bruised egos because someone flopped in a debate." A gasp escaped the gallery, sharp and electric. A staffer's pen froze mid-scribble. Across the room, a Republican colleague shot Comer a nervous glance, but Crockett pressed on, her words a metronome of truth. "Project 2025 isn't about policy, it's about power. And they're scared of programs like DEI because they can't overlook the qualified black woman in the room." The chamber crackled with tension, a theater of the absurd where truth and lies collided. Comer's face reddened, his jaw tight as a coiled spring. He banged his gavel again, the sound hollow against Crockett's composure. "The gentle lady will refrain from personal attacks," he snapped, but his voice betrayed him, a quiver of desperation, a man unraveling. Crockett tilted her head, her side eye a masterclass in disdain, as if to say, "You're not ready for this." The room felt it, the polarity sharpening, hero versus villain in stark relief. Comer's bluster was a house of cards, Crockett's fury was a pillar of steel. Mini-dramas unfolded in the margins. A Democratic aide whispered to her neighbor, "She's eating him alive." A reporter in the back scribbled furiously, sensing a headline. On X, the moment was already viral, a clip of Crockett's qualified black woman line looping with hashtags like #GirlBossEnergy and #CrockettSlays. She's not just speaking, she's preaching, one user tweeted, their post retweeted thousands of times. The audience, progressives, immigrants, dreamers, saw themselves in her defiance, their hearts pounding in sync with every word. Crockett leaned into the microphone, her voice rising, each syllable a hammer. DEI isn't fraud, it's the future. And no amount of gavel banging changes the truth. You're scared of progress, scared of us. The us landed like a grenade, encompassing every viewer who'd ever felt erased, every soul cheering from living rooms and barbershops. Comer's eyes darted, his fingers gripping the gavel as if it could anchor him. The room was a furnace now, thick with unspoken rage, every breath heavy with the weight of history. Crockett's gaze never wavered, her calm a weapon, her fury a shield. She was untouchable, a force Comer couldn't bully or silence. The air hummed with anticipation, every eye on Crockett, every ear straining for her next move. The chamber felt alive, its walls holding secrets of a nation at a crossroads. Comer's mask was slipping, his confidence fraying like cheap thread. But Crockett wasn't done. She was building to something bigger, something that would shake the room to its core. When she dropped her ultimate challenge, even the walls seemed to hold their breath. What happened next stunned the nation into silence. The hearing room was a crucible, the air thick with the weight of a moment that could shift history. Jasmine Crockett sat at the heart of it, her presence a beacon, her eyes burning with the fire of 1,000 battles won. The chamber was silent, every breath held, as if the walls themselves knew what was coming. Across from her, James Comer clutched his gavel, his knuckles white, his face a mask of forced control. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Beads of sweat glistened on his brow, his jaw twitched with the strain of holding ground against a force he couldn't tame. Sky Perryman, the witness, sat poised, her earlier testimony about Project 2025's 312 Trump mentions still echoing like a drumbeat of truth. Crockett leaned into the microphone, her voice low at first, deliberate, each word a spark in a powder keg. Miss Perryman, she began, pausing just long enough to make the room lean forward, you've laid out their playbook, 312 mentions of a man who can't face the truth. But let's talk about why we're really here. The pause stretched, heavy with intent, her gaze sweeping the chamber, locking briefly on Comer. His eyes flickered, betraying a man who sensed the ground shifting beneath him. Perryman nodded, a quiet affirmation, amplifying the proof that Crockett was about to wield like a blade. She rose in her seat, her voice climbing, steady but searing, a phoenix breaking free. This hearing isn't about oversight. It's about fear, fear of a future where diversity isn't a buzzword but a fact. Fear of programs like DEI that lift up the qualified, the capable, the undeniable. The word undeniable landed like a hammer, and a murmur rippled through the Democratic side, heads nodding, hands itching to clap. Crockett's eyes never left Comer's, her words a scalpel dissecting his arrogance. You attack DEI because it threatens your world, Mr. Chairman, a world where power stays with the few, where progress is a dirty word. Comer shifted, his gavel twitching as if to interrupt, but Crockett's voice surged, drowning out his courage. You call it fraud, I call it freedom. Freedom for every kid who looks like me, every immigrant chasing a dream, every soul told they don't belong. The chamber was electric now, the gallery stirring, a reporter in the back scribbling furiously. On X, the moment was already exploding, clips of Crockett's words looping with hashtags like #CrockettOnFire, one user tweeting, she's speaking for all of us, with 10,000 retweets in minutes. Then came the masterstroke. Crockett leaned closer to the mic, her voice dropping to a near whisper, every syllable a dagger. So next time, Mr. Chairman, tell your big boy to show up and be ready to handle the woman in the room who hopefully will become the next president. The room froze. Time itself seemed to pause, the words hanging like a thunderclap. Comer's gavel hovered midair, his eyes wide, his mouth slack in disbelief, a gut punch he couldn't dodge. The chamber's hush was deafening, broken only by a single gasp from the gallery, then a swell of applause from Democrats, bold and unrestrained. A Republican aide dropped her pen, her face pale. Perryman's nod was subtle but seismic, a silent checkmate. Cinematic flashes lit the moment, Crockett's composure unshakable, her suit crisp against the chaos, Comer's sweat-slicked forehead, his mask of authority crumbling, the gallery's eyes wide with awe, reflecting a nation watching its future unfold. Crockett's voice rose again, a crescendo of dignity's triumph. You can't silence progress, Mr. Chairman. You can't silence me. And you can't silence the America that's coming. The words were a vow, a vision, a victory. The applause grew, a wave crashing over Comer's silence, his gavel still frozen, his power exposed as fragile. For the audience, this was more than a takedown, it was a mirror. Flashbacks wove through the moment, Jasmine at 25, defending a client in a Dallas courtroom, her voice steady against a judge's sneer. Jasmine at a Delta Sigma Theta rally, vowing to lift her sisters. Jasmine in church, her faith a shield against doubt. Every struggle, every late night, every door slammed in her face had built this moment. Viewers at home, moms, students, dreamers, cheered her composure, their hearts swelling. "That's my congresswoman," a teacher in Houston tweeted, her post liked by thousands. This was their fight, their fire, their pride. Crockett sat back, her gaze still locked on Comer, her calm a weapon more powerful than his bluster. The chamber buzzed, alive with the aftershocks of her words. Comer's face was a study in defeat. Reddened, rattled, a man staring down his own irrelevance. The applause faded, but the energy lingered, a promise of change. On X, the clip of her next president line was shared 1,000,000 times, memes of Comer's stunned face flooding feeds. But this was only the spark. As the gavel finally fell, weak and belated, the real shockwaves were just beginning. America's response would rewrite the rules. The gavel fell, but the echo of Jasmine Crockett's words roared louder, a seismic wave crashing through the nation. In the House Oversight Committee chamber, the air still buzzed with her defiance, but the real explosion was unfolding beyond the marble walls. On X, the internet became a bonfire. Hashtag Crockett crushes Comer shot to the top of trending, with 1,000,000 posts in hours. A meme of James Comer slack-jawed stunned, eyes wide, gavel limp, spread like wildfire, captioned, "When you realize the black woman you underestimated just ended your whole career." Another showed Crockett mid-speech, crown photoshopped on her head, labeled Unbothered Queen Energy. Alyssa Milano retweeted a clip of the next president line, adding, "Queen's rise." Her post racked up 50,000 likes by dusk. MSNBC's Joy Reid leaned into her mic that night, eyes gleaming. This was the debate revenge we needed. Jasmine Crockett didn't just speak, she slayed. Pundits across networks replayed the moment, dissecting Comer's frozen shock as proof of a tide turning. But Comer wasn't silent. In a post-hearing press scrum, he scrambled to spin the narrative, his drawl tight with forced calm. The gentlelady's outburst breached decorum, he insisted, clutching at phrases like oversight integrity. But his words drowned in the digital deluge. A CNN cheerin flashed, Crockett's takedown goes viral, and ex-users piled on, one tweeting, "Decorum? You mean the decorum of wasting taxpayer money on your ego trip?" The post hit 10,000 retweets before Comer's team could blink. The ripple effect was a cultural earthquake. In a Chicago diner, a black family paused their meal, eyes glued to a phone replaying Crockett's qualified black woman line. The mother whispered, "That's who we need leading us." In Atlanta, a college student, queer and first generation, DM'd Crockett on Instagram, "You inspired me to run for office someday." Her message joined thousands, a flood of gratitude from young women, immigrants, dreamers who saw their futures in Crockett's fire. A Texas teacher posted a selfie with her class, holding a sign, "Thank you, Republic. Crockett, for fighting for U.S." The image went viral, shared by thousands who felt the same. This wasn't just a moment, it was a movement. Voter registration drives in swing states reported spikes, organizers citing Crockett's speech as a rallying cry. "She reminded us what's at stake," a volunteer in Georgia told a local reporter, her voice thick with pride. Community centers buzzed with watch parties, barbershops replayed the clip on loop, each view a spark for turnout. On X, a thread by a law student broke it down, Crockett didn't just dunk on Comer, she exposed the whole MAGA game. DEI isn't their enemy, progress is. The thread garnered 100,000 views, a digital sermon for a nation hungry for hope. For progressives, this was validation, a fist pump for every underdog who'd felt dismissed. Immigrants watching from cramped apartments, single moms juggling bills, queer kids hiding their truth, all saw Crockett as their champion. Her words were a mirror, reflecting their resilience, their right to belong. A viral video showed a drag queen in Dallas lip-syncing her next president line at a bar, the crowd roaring, "Preach." The moment transcended politics, becoming a cultural touchstone, a beacon against division in a fractured land. Comer's team tried to counter, leaking talking points about committee chaos, but it was like shouting into a hurricane. His stunned face was the story, his silence louder than his spin. A late-night comedian quipped, "Comer thought he was the hunter, turns out he was the prey." The audience roared, and the clip trended for days. Crockett, meanwhile, was everywhere, retweeted by Cardi B, praised by AOC, her name a hashtag, a prayer, a promise. Her unbothered queen energy became a mantra, plastered on t-shirts, scrawled in group chats, whispered in pews. The shockwaves reshaped the narrative. This wasn't just a viral moment, it was a clarion call, proof that dignity could triumph over arrogance, that one voice could shift the tide. Families shared the clip at dinner tables, sparking talks about justice, pride, the America they wanted. Young black women flooded Crockett's inbox, their messages a chorus, "You showed me I can." But amid the roar of applause, the blaze of memes, Crockett's words carved a deeper truth, one that would uplift a fractured nation, a truth waiting to be spoken in the quiet after the storm. The dust settled in the House Oversight Committee chamber, but the reverberations of Jasmine Crockett's stand pulsed through the heart of America. She sat back in her seat, her poise radiant, a quiet smile curling her lips, a smile that held the weight of 1,000 victories, the promise of 1,000 more. Across from her, James Comer's facade had crumbled, his gavel a hollow prop, his stunned silence a confession of defeat. This wasn't just a clash of words, it was a clash of worlds. And Crockett's world, built on dignity, service and unyielding truth, had won. She'd taken the venom of Comer's hearing, its veiled attacks on diversity, its fear of progress, and spun it into universal gold. "This isn't about me," her voice seemed to say, echoing beyond the chamber to every corner of the nation. "It's about us." As the 55th black woman in Congress, she stood as proof that oppression's chains were breaking, that the American dream wasn't a relic but a fire, fueled by diverse voices like hers. Where Comer clung to supremacy, to a fading vision of power hoarded by the few, Crockett embodied service. Her life a testament to lifting others, from Dallas courtrooms to Capitol Hill. This was the moral at the heart of her triumph: dignity over hate, truth over lies, unity over division. Picture a family of immigrants in Miami, nodding in solidarity as they watched her clip on a cracked phone screen, their eyes bright with hope. "She's fighting for us," the father whispered, his voice thick. In a Seattle coffee shop, a white ally vowed to amplify marginalized voices, inspired by Crockett's call to action. In a Georgia church, a choir hummed a hymn of justice, their pastor citing her as proof that faith could move mountains. These weren't just vignettes, they were America, stitching itself together, thread by thread, through her example. Crockett's win wasn't hers alone, it was ours. "This is proof," her story urged, "that truth spoken boldly shatters ceilings." Every viewer felt it, the single mom in Chicago, wiping tears as she saw her daughter's future in Crockett's eyes, the queer teen in Houston, scribbling "I can do this" in their journal, the retiree in Philly, texting his grandkids to vote. Her words were a mirror, reflecting the best of what Americanness could be, a nation where justice wasn't a slogan but a fight, where diversity wasn't a threat but a strength. Comer's world, built on fear and exclusion, couldn't withstand that vision. His reddened face, his frozen gavel, were relics of a time running out. The emotional crescendo swelled as Crockett's quiet smile became a symbol of hope's power. Not loud, not fleeting, but steady, enduring. She'd faced the gavel and made it flinch, faced the system and made it bend. For progressives, for immigrants, for anyone who'd ever felt erased, this was validation, a call to stand taller, to speak louder. Picture a young black girl in Dallas, watching the viral clip, whispering to her mom, "I want to be like her." That girl was the future, and Crockett was its architect, her every step a brick in a road others could walk. The nation wasn't healed, not yet, but Crockett's stand was a spark, a reminder that division could be bridged by courage. Her faith, her sisterhood, her relentless grit had carried her here, and now they carried millions. From X threads to kitchen tables, her name was a rallying cry, her smile a promise that justice could prevail. This was the America worth fighting for, one where a black woman from Texas could stare down a Kentucky gatekeeper and emerge not just victorious, but transformative. As her smile lingered, soft but unyielding, it whispered a truth louder than any gavel: hope's quiet power could reshape a fractured land, and the work was just beginning. The title said it all: James Comer's shocking reaction to Jasmine Crockett's testimony stuns Congress. But this was no mere moment, it was mic drop magic, a blaze of truth that lit up the fragility of power. Jasmine Crockett, with her unyielding gaze and words sharp as steel, didn't just stun Comer, she shook the foundations of a system built on fear. His frozen gavel, his slack-jawed silence, became symbols of an old guard crumbling, while her voice, bold, righteous, radiant, carried the promise of an America unafraid to evolve. In that hearing room, the world held its breath, and what unfolded was a masterclass in courage. Crockett, the 55th black woman in Congress, turned a sham hearing into a stage for dignity, exposing Comer's attacks on diversity as the desperate flailing of a man out of time. Her fire wasn't just for her, it was for every dreamer, every underdog, every soul who's ever stood tall against the odds. This is the moral clarity we carry forward. In America's arena, progress demands courage, and heroes like Crockett light the way. Now, it's your turn to keep that fire burning. Hit subscribe to join the fight for truth, to stand with those who speak boldly for justice. Share this video if Crockett's spark lit something in you, because together, we're the shockwave that changes everything. What's your story of standing tall? Drop it in the comments below, and let's build this movement, one voice at a time. The room may have fallen silent when Comer's gavel faltered, but our roar is just beginning. Let's make it echo, let's make it last, let's make it the sound of an America rising, united, unstoppable.